Hi class, today we are going to do lesson 1.2 in our math, but before we start this lesson I want to go over place value one more time. Now a couple days ago you should have played a review place value game on Think Central to help you review and prepare for this lesson. So I have a number written here, okay, this is a 3-digit number, 156 is my number, and so what I want to do is just review what the place values are, okay. So 156. So the first, this is my hundreds place. The 50, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 is my tens place. And 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, those are my ones. It is so important that you always remember your place value. You're going to need it for adding, subtracting, multiplying, everything. You will also need it for rounding, which is what we are going to do today. So if you don't have your math book, pause the video and go grab it. If you do have your math book, you can go ahead and open up your math book to lesson 1.2. If you're wanting to tear out your pages, you're going to tear out the first 2 pages of lesson 1.2. And we are ready to begin. Okay, so the title of this lesson is Round to the Nearest 10 or 100. Okay, your essential question is, how can you round numbers? All right, well, you started learning about rounding in 2nd grade. So we are going to build off of the lessons you had in 2nd grade today. Unlock the problem. When you round a number, round is highlighted, so that tells us this is an important term and it is one of our vocabulary words. When you round a number, you find a number that tells you about how much or about how many. Mia's baseball bat is 32 inches long. What is its length rounded to the nearest 10 inches? So that means we're going to take the number 32 and we are going to round it to the nearest 10. Now let's remember our place value. The 3 is in the tens place and the 2 is in the ones place. We want to round to the nearest 10. So when we think about rounding to the nearest 10, we're thinking about tens. And when you think about tens, remember counting by 10. 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, and so on. So we're going to use a number line this time. So they have the number line drawn out for you, and it's 0 to 40. And notice they counted by tens, okay? Our number is 32. So they have found that number on the line for you and plotted it. So here's your 32. It's about here. Now these dash marks halfway between, well, think about what number is halfway between 0 and 10. 5. Yes, your number should be 5. So these halfway marks represent 5. So that means this one is 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40. Okay, now that we understand this number line, let's begin to answer the questions. Find which tens the number is between. Remember, tens, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, and so on. So 32 is between blank and blank. So these are my tens. These are my numbers counting by 10. Look at which two numbers 32 is in between. So I see 30 on this side of my dot, and I see 40 on that side. So 32 is between 30 and 40. 32 is closer to blank than it is to blank. Okay, now we're still talking about the tens. So I want you to look at 30, and I want you to look at 40, and look at our blue dot. Just by looking at it, is the blue dot closer to the 30 or closer to the 40? I hope you said 30 because the blue dot is closest to 30. So on our line, we would write 32 is closer to 30 than it is to 40. You should start getting some hints on what we're going to be rounding our number to. So 32 rounded to the nearest 10 is, so when you have the number 32 here, what is the nearest 10? Tens are counting by 10, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. So is it closer to 30 or is it closer to 40? And we found that it is closer to 30. So 32 rounded to the nearest 10 is 30. So the length of Mia's bat rounded to the nearest 10 inches is 30 inches. Okay, let's move on to the next question. Part B. Round 174 to the nearest 100. Now we're going to be rounding to the nearest 100. When I think of hundreds, you should think of 100, 200, 300, 400, 500, 600, 700, 800, and so on. To review our place value, look at this number. You have a 1 in the hundreds place, you have a 7 in the tens place, and you have a 4 in the ones place. So I'm rounding to the nearest 100, and you can see they've already made your number line for you. You can also tell this number line is counting by hundreds, whereas the number line up here, we were going to round to the nearest 10, so this number line is counting by tens. So down here, I'm counting by hundreds. They've already placed your number. So 174 is here. Now, here's a trick question. When we were counting by tens, the halfway dash mark in between each 10 represented 5. Here we're counting by 100. So what do you think half of 100 is? What would this half mark represent? Hopefully you said 50. Half of 100 is 50. So the half mark represents 50. So that means this is 0, 50, 100, 150, 200, 250, 300. 174 is more than 150. So that helped them figure out where to place it on the number line. They know it had to be after 150. Okay, I think we're ready. Find which hundreds the number is between. 174 is between blank and blank. We're only looking at the hundreds. So we're looking at this number and this number. These are the two numbers that it is in between. So it is between 100 and 200. Now I want you to look at your blue dot and tell me, is it closer to the 200 or is it closer to the 100? We can easily see that it is much closer to the 200. So we would say that 174 is closer to 200 than it is to 100. So that tells us 174 rounded to the nearest 100 is 200. All right, flip your page over. We're going to do some more practice. Let's see if I can zoom in a little more. There we go. Try this. Round 718 to the nearest 10 and 100. So now we're going to do both. Locate and label 718 on the number lines. Okay, so first, let's remind ourselves of the place value. The 7 is in the hundreds place, the 1 is in the tens place, and the 8 is in the ones place. On our number line, counting to the nearest 10, we are going to be counting by 10. So we have 700, 710, 720. We already learned that these little dashes in the middle represent 5 when we're counting by tens. So the first thing we need to do is locate and label 718 on the number lines. All right, so I know it's not in between 700 and 710. And after 710, I have 715. And it's got to be after that. So in my head, I'm going to imagine moving down the number line to 716, 717, 718. I would say it's right about in the middle between 715 and 720. And I'm going to label my point. 718. Make sure you are doing this on your number line. 718 is closer to blank than it is to blank. We're rounding to the nearest 10, so those are the only numbers I'm going to look at. 710, 720. Now that I have them circled, it's easy to see 718 is much closer to 720 than it is to 710. So I would say 718 is closer to 720 than it is to 710. So that tells me that 718 rounds to 720. Now we are going to take the same number and we're going to round it to the nearest 100. Now when you're counting by hundreds, you're looking for 700, 800, 900 numbers that are hundreds numbers. Now 718. Well, I know that it comes after 700. So they've started my number line after 700. I know 718 is somewhere in the 700s. Okay? So my number line starts at 700 and it ends at 800. But wait, this number line is a little bit different than our other hundreds number line that we did. Our other hundreds number line would have said 700, 800, 900, 1000. This one says 700, 750, and 800. So I want you to think what you think these little dash marks represent in between. I will give you a moment. Okay. So you may have figured out that these little dash marks represent 10. So that means this is 710, 720, 730, 740, and then you land on 750, and so on. So what I need to do is I need to figure out where I'm going to put 718 on this number line. So I know that this is 700, and this is 710. And one more would be 720. And I know that 720 is more than 718. So I'm going to go back to 710. And I'm going to imagine I'm counting by ones. And I'm going to say 711, 712, 713, 714, 715, 716, 717, 718. So it's really close to the 720 spot, but not quite. So I'm going to draw my dot. I'm also going to label it. Make sure you're doing this on your number line. Now that I have it labeled on here, I don't need to worry about these little 10 marks. I'm rounding to the nearest 100, so that means the only numbers I'm going to worry about are the hundreds. So that is 700 and 800. 718 is between 700 and 800. Those are the only numbers that could be my answer. So looking at this dot, look and see which it's closer to, 700 or 800. 718 is closer to 700 than it is to 800. So that tells me that 718 rounded to the nearest 100 is 700. Okay. Now we're going to look at another way. This way uses place value. Okay. So before I do the problem, I want you to look at this little notebook over here. This notebook has all the steps written for you on a nice little list here, which can become very handy when you're doing your homework later. So find the place to which you want it to round. Okay? Then look at the digit to the right. If the digit is less than 5, the digit in the rounding place stays the same. If the digit is 5 or greater, the digit in the rounding place increases by 1. Write zeros for the digits to the right of the rounding place. All right, so you may be thinking you have no idea what they're talking about. Let's break it down. We're going to round 63 to the nearest 10. Okay, if we're rounding to the nearest 10, you need to remember that means 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, and so on. To review our place value, 6 is in our tens place, and the 3 is in our ones place. Okay? Think. The digit in the ones place tells if the number is closer to 60 or 70. So don't get confused by this. They're talking about the digit in the ones place. So when you're rounding to the nearest 10, you're going to look at the number directly to the right, its neighbor. So when you look at its neighbor, the 3, is the 3 less than or greater than 5? Okay, you know 3 is less than 5. And our rule says if the digit is less than 5, the digit in the rounding place, which is the tens, stays the same. So the tens digit stays the same. Write 6 as the tens digit. Okay, there's my 6. Write 0 as the ones digit. So 63 rounded to the nearest 10 is 60. Now we're going to round 457 to the nearest 100. Remember, we're rounding to the nearest 100. That means we're looking for 100. And hundreds are 100, 200, 300, 400, 500, 600, 700, and so on. Those are the only answers you're looking for. Okay, so I want you to think the digit in the tens place tells if the number is closer to 400 or 500. Now, you're not looking at your ones place this time. We're rounding to the nearest 100. 4 is in our hundreds place. I'm going to look at its neighbor to the right. Okay, its neighbor to the right is 5 in the tens place. Is 5 greater than or less than 5? Well, 5 is actually equal to 5. So when I go over to my checklist, it says if the digit is 5 or greater, the digit in the rounding place increases by 1. Well, the digit in my rounding place is 4. So I need to increase it by 1. That means my 4 is going to become a 5. The hundreds digit increases by 1. Right, 5 is the hundreds digit. So boom, 5. Write zeros as the tens and ones digit. You might be wondering, why do we just write zeros? How do we know? Well, here's a handy trick. Whenever you're rounding, whatever place value you're rounding to, all the numbers after that place value are going to be 0. So here I'm rounding to the nearest 10. So I wrote my number in the tens place, but every number after it will be 0. Here I'm rounding to the nearest 100, so I wrote my hundreds number here, and every number after the hundreds place is 0. Okay, grab the next page for the share and show. It says locate and label 46 on the number line. Round to the nearest 10. I'm going to have you go ahead and I want you to find where 46 should go on the number line, draw your dot, and label it. Okay. We are rounding to the nearest 10. That means we're looking for a 10, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, and so on. Our number line is already labeled by tens, 30, 40, 50, 60. Perfect. We also know that that halfway mark is 5. So that's 35, 45, 55. Perfect. So I need to label 46. Hopefully you said 40, 45, and then one more is 46. So your dot will go just after 45, okay? Now, I'm rounding to the nearest 10, so I only need to look at the tens that are on each side of my number. So on this side of my number, I have 40, and on this side of my number, I have 50. Those are the only tens I need to worry about. So I can see that 46 is between 40 and 50. Now, 46 is closer to, well, let's look at it. Is it closer to the 40 or is it closer to the 50? If you noticed, it passed the 5, the halfway mark. So that means it's on this side. It's closer to the 50. So 46 is closer to 50 than it is to 40. So that tells me that 46 rounded to the nearest 10 is 50. Now I want to take that same number and I want to do it using place value that we just learned on the other page. So if I take 46 and I tell you I want to round it to the nearest 10. So I've underlined the place value that I'm rounding to. That's my tens. I know I need to look at the number directly to the right, which is 6. And I have to ask myself, is 6 greater than or less than 5? 6 is greater than 5. So if the number that you're looking at is 5 or more, then you know you have to raise the score. That means you have to raise this one more. So my 4 becomes a 5, and I'm rounding to the nearest tens. So everything after my tens place turns into 0. Same answer, different way. All right, let's do some practice. So now they're giving you numbers, and you don't have a number line. Now, you can use a whiteboard or a piece of paper to draw a number line if that helps you, or you can do the place value method, whichever works for you. Let's begin. First thing you need to make sure you do is read these directions. They are different. And if you don't round to the right place because you didn't read the directions, then you're going to really mess yourself up. So, first it tells me round to the nearest 10. So that means I need to look at tens numbers, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, and so on. So I'm going to look at 19. The first thing I want to tell me is when you're counting by tens, what tens are on each side of 19? Okay, good. I hope you said it's 10 and 20. I'm writing them on each side of 19 to show you, since we don't have a number line. All right. So you could sit here and you could use a number line in your head or on a piece of whiteboard, and you could say, well, on the number line, I can clearly see 19 is closer to 20. And you're probably right. But let's check it using the place value method. So, using the place value method, I'm rounding to the nearest tens. So let me find my number that's in the tens place, which is 1, is in the tens place. I look to the number to my right, 9. Is 9 greater than or less than 5? 9 is greater than 5, okay? So if it's 5 or more, you raise the score. So that means that the number in that spot that we underlined, it needs to raise or increase by 1, which would make it a 2, and everything after that place value that we're rounding to changes to 0. So 20 was correct. So we were right. So 19 rounded to the nearest 10 is 20. I'm showing you a bunch of different ways to solve these problems. Honestly, unless it tells you to do a specific thing, you use the method that works best for you. Let's look at number 5. 66. We want to round it to the nearest 10. So I'm going to think what 10s are on each side of 66. Well, I know if I go down, the 10 I run into is 60. And I know when I go count by 10, 60, 70 is the next 10. Okay? So rounding by 10s, and I know 6 is more than 5, so it's more than halfway in between 60 and 70, which means that it's probably closer to 70. But let's go ahead and do the place value way to see. I'm rounding to the nearest 10, so I'm going to find the number in the tens place, which is right here. I'm going to underline it. 6 is in the tens place. I'm going to look to the number to my right. Boom, there it is. Does the number to my right, is it greater than or less than 5? Well, 6 is greater than 5, so that tells me 5 or more raise the score. So that means I need to raise this number by 1. So my 6 becomes a 7, and because I'm rounding, every number after that place value turns to 0. All right, I'm going to give you a minute to do number 6 by yourself. Go ahead. Okay, so depending on which way you chose to do it, if you did more the number line way, you would have thought, okay, well, what 10 is directly before this? And that would be 50, 50, 60 is your next 10. You would say, well, 51, that's only 1 after 50. So it's probably closer to this number. But let's do the place value way to check. So I'm rounding to the nearest 10. I'm going to find the number in that place value, in the tens. 5 is in my tens place. I'm going to look at the number directly to the right of it, and that's 1. Is 1 less than or greater than 5? Well, 1 is less than 5, so that means that this number will not change. It is still 5. Because I'm rounding, every number after that place value changes to 0. And there you have it. Okay, let's look at rounding to the nearest 100. So the first thing I'm going to do is find my place value. I'm rounding to the nearest 100, so I'm going to find my hundreds place. We have ones, tens, hundreds. So I'm going to underline my hundreds place. 4. I'm counting to the nearest 100, so my answer is going to be a hundreds number. 100, 200, 300, 400, and so on. So when I think of the number 463, what is the 100 that comes just before it? Well, that should be 400. And then I just count by hundreds. 400, 500 is on the other side of this number. Okay? 463. Now, if you are good at mental math and thinking, well, which number is this closer to, then this works for you. But if you're not, let's do that place value method. All right, so I have my 4 underlined. I am just going to go look to my neighbor at the right. Okay, I'm not looking at the ones place. You just look to your neighbor at the right. When I look at the 6, I have to ask myself, is 6 greater than or less than 5? 6 is greater than 5. So 5 or more, you raise the score. So I'm going to look at the 4, and I need to raise it by 1. So that means my answer is going to start with a 5. I also know that because I'm rounding, every number after that place value changes to 0. So this tells me that 463 rounded to the nearest 100 is 500. Okay, let's look at this one. 202. Rounded to the nearest 100. Here's the number in my hundreds place. If I go down to the nearest 100, I get 200. And if I count by hundreds, 200. 300 is the next one. So I know 202 is between 200 and 300. Now, this is kind of easy to see. 202 is just a little bit more than 200. So my brain is telling me I'm going to round down to 200. But let's try the place value method to be sure. I'm going to look to my neighbor to the right. Boom. 0. Is 0 greater than or less than 5? 0 is less than 5. So my number is not going to change. It's going to stay the same. So I write down my 2. And because I'm rounding, every number after that place value is going to change to 0. Okay, so 202 rounded to the nearest hundred is 200. Now, go ahead and do number 9 by yourself. All right, so depending on which way you did, hopefully you were able to find your answer. Let's see. 658, I'm going to find my hundreds place right there. Boom. And I'm going to think, okay, well, what's the 100 directly below this? That would be 600. And if I'm counting by hundreds, 600. 700 is the next one. So I know this number is between 600 and 700. Now, if I'm good with number lines, I would know that this number is going to probably be closer to that one because it's past halfway. I know halfway is 50. 650 is halfway. Let's do the place value method to be sure. I'm going to look to my neighbor to the right. Boom. My neighbor to the right is a 5. 5 or more, raise the score.
Staff, please pardon this interruption. If someone has my walkie-talkie, could they please return it? I need it. So if you have Latrice's walkie-talkie, would you please return it? Thank you.
Sorry about that. So 5 or more, raise the score. So I'm going to raise this number by 1. So 6 turns into 7. And all of the numbers following that place value turn into zeros. So 658 rounded to the nearest hundred is 700. All right, we're almost done. On your own. Locate and label 548 on the number line. Round to the nearest hundred. Okay, we're rounding to the nearest hundred, so that means we're looking for 100. 400, 500, and 600 are already on our number line. Let's look at our dashes in between and figure out what they represent. So count your dashes and see if you can figure out what they represent. Okay, hopefully you found out these are tens. So 410, 420, 430, 440, 450, and so on. So I need to find 548. Well, I already know 548 is going to be past 500. So I'm going to start at 500. I have 510, 520, 530, 540, 550. 550 is too far, but I know 548 is just before 550. So you're going to put your dot just before the 550 mark. Make sure you label it. Okay. So now this shows me that 548 is between 500 and 600. This one is much harder to see just by looking at it to figure out its place value. 548 is between 500 and 600. 548 is closer to blank than it is to blank. Well, we know that 50 is the halfway mark, right? So let's find 50. 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. So if this is the halfway point, our number has not crossed the halfway point. So that means it's on this side, which would make it closer to 500. Now, that may be hard to see though, so you could always do the place value method, which I will do over here on the side. I'm looking to round to the nearest 100, so I'm going to look to my neighbor to the right. 4 is less than 5, so it stays the same. So 5, and then all the numbers after it turn to 0. So 548 rounded to the nearest 100 is 500. We were correct. Okay. There are, now let me go back. Do you see where it says go deeper here? When you see a question that says go deeper, it's usually going to be a word problem, and it means it's going to make you think harder. It may be a more difficult question, or it may be a question that has multiple steps, but you need to pay close attention to all the information they give you. One of the things that we will do is we are going to circle important information, and we are going to underline the question. So, there are 372 workers at a software company. There are 483 workers at a lumber company. When rounding to the nearest 100, this is important, nearest 100, which company has 400 workers? Okay, so we need to round each number to the nearest 100 to see which one rounds to 400. So I'm going to look at 372 first. Notice I'm showing my work. You always want to show your work. Okay, a good mathematician always shows their work. So I find my number in the hundreds place. It's 3. Look to the right at my neighbor. It's 7. So 7 is greater than 5. And we know that 5 or more, you raise the score. So that means I'm going to raise this underlined number by 1 to the number 4. Since I'm rounding, all of the digits after this place value will turn to 0. 372 rounds to 400, which is what we're looking for. But a good mathematician will still check the other number to be sure. So the second number is 483. So I'm rounding to the nearest 100. Boom, underline it. Look to my neighbor to the right, 8. 8 is greater than 5. So 5 or more, you raise the score. So I know my 4 is going to go up by 1 to 5. And every number after that place value will turn to zeros. So this cannot be my answer, because my question asks which company has 400 workers. So 372 is rounded to 400. So 372 workers are at the software company. So my answer is the software company. All right, awesome. You are now going to go to your Think Central, and you can watch the bunny lesson, the interactive lesson, if you need more practice, or if you want to do it for fun. But you have an assignment on Think Central to complete, and I will see you again tomorrow. Bye.